obviously, film schools, they vary in range and in terms of tuition costs and so on. So let's talk about the financial investment as a starting point. Let's just arguably say that you have $30,000 and you want to get into the film industry. So what makes the $30,000 investment into a film school education versus, say, taking that $30,000 and using it for another purpose and kind of school of hard knocksing it? What would you say are sort of the pros and cons to both ideas? And I have my thoughts as well.
Yeah, and I'm not going to take a cop out, but I think so much of it comes down to who you are, where you are in your life, what you have available to you, all of those things. But I will say right off the top, either path is completely valid. It would be kind of morally bankrupt of me to say that film school is not worth it, because I spent, as you mentioned, 18 years working at a film school and actually did a lot of recruitment and signed a lot of people up. So I'm a firm believer that film school, can be worth the investment. And I say can be worth the investment because so much of it comes down to who you are as a person. And like I say, where you are in your life. Because, myself, as an example, I grew up in northern British Columbia. I didn't even realize that making movies was a job until probably, in university. And I was at the University of Northern British Columbia studying to be a teacher, because that was kind of the only job that I felt within the realm of my experience that I kind of had permission to do. And there was one film course up there, and I took it and I thought, there's an infrastructure behind this. There's an education system behind this. There's people that get paid to do this, which sounds really dumb in a lot of ways, but that was really my mentality growing up in rural northern British Columbia. So for me, it made a lot of sense. Film school gave me the reason, the magnet to kind of go. I was at the point in my life where I was supposed to go to post-secondary education. I had left the post-secondary that I was in. And so, yeah, film school was really logical for me as a way to, my mentor actually at the film school, Michael Baser, always used to say, you have to put yourself in the way of success, right? And film school was the only way that I could kind of put myself in the way of a film career of any kind. I went to the Vancouver Film School, but I didn't have enough money, to the question about finances. I didn't have enough money to afford the full film program. So I took the screenwriting program instead, which I'm so happy that I did. And I think that was much more sort of my tribe, and I found wonderful people there. So I kind of have this story where I did film school in the screenwriting sense, but at the same time, I graduated having no idea how to really make a movie. We did a couple of exercises at the school at that time. And there's since a course that I helped create and that Ken actually taught for a while for producing for writers, which is really valuable now. But at the time, there was nothing really about the nuts and bolts. There's that old adage of, the screenwriter writes, the army comes over the hill. And then next thing it takes a couple thousand people to actually make that scene happen, right? So my real film school, like learning how to actually make films, was after I graduated from the screenwriting program and kind of decided that the traditional screenwriting route of kind of sitting and banging out scripts and then going and getting rejected over and over again wasn't for me. And so I worked on a feature film with some friends. I had gathered sort of some collaborators by that point, and we worked on a feature film. And that to me was my film school. But everybody that I worked with on that, I had met through the film school, or they had gone to film school for the more technical aspects in a traditional kind of film program. That to me is the big thing, is what do you have available, and how industrious and how entrepreneurial are you? If you have $30,000, it's one of those things where when you haven't been to film school, $30,000 seems like a really good investment for film school. The moment you graduate, you're going, why didn't I spend my $30,000 on a film? That's a budget. That's a dream budget for a lot of starting out filmmakers. So I don't know. It's tough.
Yeah, and there's an analogy I always say. It's like the same thing with like eating a meal, where it's like, you order all your food and you eat it, and then you get the bill at the end and you go, well, oh, why did I order all this food? I didn't expect to. I wasn't even really that hungry, and it's only because you sort of see the ticker at the end, and you go like, oh wow, I just spent a lot of money on something, and I don't, and I'm not full. I'm not hungry anymore because I've already eaten. I've already gotten what I got out of it. And I maybe had a very similar path, although I came to it a little bit later. I went to film school when I was 30. Well, I was 34 when I signed up. And so I had this sort of life experience. And it wasn't that I had the money necessarily to go, because that money, again, I had expenses and I had other things I had to be spending money on. But the financial investment for me with regards to education has always been, that's an investment in yourself. So one way or another, whether you're taking that money and using it as, like, let's say you're taking that $30,000 and using it to fund a very low budget independent film movie. You say, I'm going to take my $30,000 and I'm going to make a movie for $30,000. Well, you have to view that as an educational expense, an investment in yourself, which means that you have to you can't think of that $30,000 as, I'm going to make the best movie ever made in my life. I'm going to make a movie that's going to teach me all of these things that I need to learn in order to become a good filmmaker or a writer or a director or something like that. So that's how I've always viewed the financial part of it, because it's, I think, the debate doesn't even matter what field you're going into or what you want to do. Should you go to get an arts degree at a university and spend, $50,000, $40,000 on a 4-year degree, maybe more, depending on where you're going, to get an arts degree, to get an English degree, to get a history degree? In theory, what does a history degree get you? Like, financially, it's not, other than an opportunity to become a history teacher, which means you go for more school, right?
Which is what I was doing. Yeah. It was history, ironically.
Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with that inherently. I mean, if we're taking it purely from the utilitarian value of the $30,000 expense, there's definitely ways to justify not spending that money and spending it on something more pragmatic. And this is where I want to get into the weeds a little bit more on this, is that, that what does that money give you in life, in all these other things? And I'll just use my example, and then maybe we'll pivot back to you. Like, I think to myself, okay, so I can't remember now what film school cost when we went there, but I got a student loan on it as well. So overall, I'm just going to say it was $30,000. Well, I have worked in the industry for the last 15 years. Arguably, in at least one of those years, I've made well over $30,000 in a job situation in the film industry. Did film school get me that job, or make it possible for me to be in a position to get that job, which then paid for itself? And I mean, over the course of my lifetime in the film industry or making films, have I made that money back, and has that investment proven to be worthwhile? I would argue in my situation that yes. I mean, it makes sense if I take a pure dollar for dollar expense. It's like, if I spent $30,000 on film school, have I made 10 times that in the film industry over 15 years? I'd say for sure. That's definitely in terms of jobs. So I don't know how you feel about that in terms of equating it to, if I'm justifying it.
No, that's actually a very logical way to put it. And my brain works a little less logically sometimes, because I think one of the things that film school is selling is a lot less nuts and bolts. It's selling dreams, right? And that's the hard part of, like, do you feel like you're living your dream? And so I think that the reality is always somewhere in between those two questions, right? Because everybody has this idea they're going to go to film school. Not everybody, but most people have this idea they're going to go to film school and they're going to be, Steven Spielberg or George Lucas or somebody like that, kind of were the first wave of those film school directors. So I think the bigger question is sort of, what do you want to get out of it? And the thing about film is that it's a collaborative industry. It's a relationship industry. And so if you have any relationships whatsoever, or you have the ability to go to a place where you can find those relationships, do that first, because it's probably going to be significantly less expensive. However, if you find yourself in a place where I was, and I'm assuming kind of from the episode you guys did about your background and what you've just said, Anthony, that you were kind of in a similar situation of, like, you didn't have those relationships to be able to call on, of, like, to get onto a film set, to get the chance to, like, play around with a camera, to get the chance to work with actors, to do all those things. And so it really, to me, that's what it comes down to. Because the other thing about film school, we both went to a very sort of truncated 1-year applied education model, which is what VFS is. There's different kinds of film school out there in terms of a 4-year degree program. You can do master's degree programs. There's all different kinds of film schools out there. And so for me, that kind of is the matrix that you need to look at, because there's no way that you can bank on living your dream by paying to go to film school. That's the one thing right off the bat. If you feel like it's going to make you a filmmaker, it's not going to make you a filmmaker. Life chooses you to be a filmmaker. You don't choose to be a filmmaker. So that's kind of the first thing. The second thing is, do you need a degree? Is that important to you? That's going to automatically be a fork in the road of all the different kinds of film schools. In my opinion, I think that spending 4 years studying film to get into the film industry is a complete waste of time. I think that's one of the things that that VFS and these other short form film schools do really well is they accelerate that. They give you a bit of a shortcut to industry by not only giving you relationships with your the instructors and the mentors and all of the people that they bring in, but with your classmates. And that to me is, I think, the thing that I saw most at the film school over and over and over again. There was wonderful relationships, like I say, between instructors and students, and there was continuing mentorship, and there was a leg up given that way. And that part, the school can kind of control. The thing that the school couldn't control as much was just that lottery of who gets put into a cohort together. And that to me is one of the big things that's really special is those folks that you're going to meet and then you're going to come up through the industry together. And I think that's the kind of thing. Again, I'm going to be a little less logical about my financial evaluation here, but that's the kind of thing you can't really put a price on. I still, to this day, write with a guy that I met in film school at VFS back in 2005. On the first day, he laughed at one of my jokes, and I thought that, because not everybody, it was a bit of a subtle joke. And from that moment forward, we've been collaborators. And that is what you need. You have to find collaborators. Particularly, you and I have both kind of pursued the indie film route. And I think that's the thing where when you're making an indie film, even when you're making a larger film, when you have money, the problems are just a little bit different, but it's still all problems. But especially when you're making an indie film and there's nobody screaming down your throat with, where's our money and this and that, you're kind of having to get the thing going on your own. You're going to need people that are going to be in the trenches with you, that are going to push you forward, that are going to, pick you up when you fall down, that you can pick up when they fall down. You really need those very close collaborators. And so that to me is kind of the larger thing is like, and this is kind of from the lens of if you want to, be a key on a film set, if you want to be somebody that's going to be making the big decisions, writing the screenplay, producing, directing, those kinds of things. There's so much that you just can't really learn in a classroom. You have to do it. And that's true of all roles on a set. But the more technical roles, like in the, on the camera team, in post-production, those roles that are a lot more tied to the technical element, that I think if you're really passionate about, that kind of it, I think film school is a fantastic option because you get to go and you'd want to look into the film school again that you're going to, but you get to go and touch that gear. You get to play with those systems. You get to learn those workflows. So I think again, I'm not trying to take a cop-out way of doing this here, but it really depends on who you know. And film school is going to introduce you to so many people and hopefully give you those relationships, like I say, that are going to kind of power you through your career.
You can pick up a lot of tips and tools on, for example, YouTube or like taking an online class or something like that. But ultimately, in the end, you still have to go and play with the equipment. So like I can watch a YouTube video on how to get great cinematography in a film. But if I don't have a camera, if I want to learn about how to get good location sound, like what's important about location sound, if I don't go out and practice using my microphone, and if all I'm doing is going out and recording sounds on the street just to sort of get practice in recording sounds, well, I can't apply that to anything in the moment because I don't have a film project to work on. So I might be doing all this stuff and learning the technical side of things, but I'm not applying it to a project-based finishing item. And where I found film school was very advantageous in this regard. And again, you would just have to replicate this on your and find, like you said, a who you know sort of thing is like, can you get together 10 to 15 people who all are motivated enough to want to spend the time to learn these tools to put together a project that allows you to actually apply what you're learning on YouTube or whatever it is. And I think that with the film school approach, what you've done is you go, okay, well, there's a project. Here's the project. The project is make a short film or make a documentary or do a class exercise. And through that, you're going to practice your location sound, your camera work, your lighting, your blocking, all of the directing skills that you need. Because even though as a director, you don't need to be an expert in how a light works, you do need to know what a light does. and you need to know what you can ask for. And also you need to know how to communicate your vision to people and get them to do the work for you. I used to say that filmmaking is like painting, except your paintbrushes are people. And what you need to do is learn what people can do, what tools do what, which people do what, and how to get the most out of those people.
Totally. I'm thinking of like an A24 horror movie now where there's a guy that actually paints with people. But anyway, we'll pitch that later. But no, I think you're absolutely right. It's just all there packaged for you. Again, like I always used to say to all of the students that I met around the world that were looking to get into film school, because the question everybody has, whether they want to go to film school or they want to make a film, is how do I get there? You know, like how do I see myself doing this thing on a film set? How do I get there? And so, to your point, if you're not going to go to film school, let's put it this way. Because like I say, it's all packaged, it's ready to go. It's these assignments, you're being walked through things. There's experts there to help you and tap you on the shoulder and say, do it this way, don't do it that way. If you don't have that, there's really only two ways you can go about it, right? And one is to go and volunteer on any film set you can and start from the very, very bottom. And actually on Charlotte's Song, we had a guy that did that, this young guy, James, who was our Tad on that movie, because we were so indie. And to call him a Tad is like to say that, our AD department was organized, and no disrespect to our ADs, they were brought in very last minute, but he came in with zero experience. We were like, well, why don't you just do this and kind of babysit, bringing the actors back and forth and this and that. He now is super established as a crew member in town. I bumped into him at Whistler just a few months ago, and yeah, he's thriving. But you start with nothing, and you have to be willing to do anything, and you have to be ready to keep your mouth shut about most, if not all, of the creative ideas that you have. Right? Nobody wants to hear it from the guy that just walked onto the set. So that's one way. And then the other way to do it, if you don't go to film school, is you have to have intellectual property. You have to be a good writer. You have to have really good ideas. And if you have a really good idea and you're a decent writer, that will also allow you a little bit of squeak in. But then too, you still have to get your work in front of people, and you have to be pitching to people and all of that kind of thing. But those to me are the two kind of ways that you do it if you don't go to film school. But when you do go, it's one of those things that you just got to do your research. And what I would say, and definitely a lot of the problems that I saw over my time there with people who didn't have the best experience, was they didn't find those collaborators. They were isolated, or they felt like maybe they were operating at a little higher level than maybe some of their classmates. And that's the thing that I would say to most people is when you first get to whatever film school you're going to, if you've made that investment, hold them to account. If you see, you look around and you don't see collaborators within the first month or so of your program, oftentimes you can still get a giant refund at that point, and you can leave and go do something else if you're not finding those people. But I guarantee you, if you go and take the time and you have a good attitude about it, there's so many people that go through film school and like, it either somebody else has paid for them, or they just don't value money, because you see those folks, and they're a minority, they're a huge minority, but you see those folks that show up and just don't try. But if you're going into film school with a good attitude, and you're in there in good faith, and you want to really put your best foot forward, because that's what the film industry is. You need to be showing up early, staying late, doing like 10%, if not 20% more than you've been asked. At the end of the day, nobody cares if you went to film school or not. All they care about is, can you deliver on whatever they've given you to do? And film school can help you have those skills to do that. If you're able to do it and find those relationships without it, then that's fine too. But yeah, it's one of those questions that really is only answerable by the individual person who's asking it at any given moment in time,